What would you do if your own family invited you to a wedding, but banned your husband and children from coming? For 12 years, she lived a quiet life, far from luxury.
Thank you so much for coming.
A billionaire's daughter who gave up everything for love. But on that cold winter night in Aspen, when a snowstorm swept through the mountains, something happened that melted even the proudest hearts. Sometimes, the invitation we're denied becomes the one that changes everything. Would you forgive your family or close the door forever?
My husband and my children,
Tell us in the comments.
then they've
What does family truly mean to you? Snow drifted softly against the window of a small cottage on the outskirts of Aspen. The fireplace crackled with a tired warmth, filling the room with the scent of pine and old memories. Liz sat by the wooden table, her hands trembling slightly as she opened the thick ivory envelope sealed with the Monroe family crest, the symbol of a world she had once belonged to. Inside was a wedding invitation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Monroe, her niece, her brother's daughter. Liz smiled faintly at the name, but the warmth faded the moment she reached the bottom line. Guest: Elizabeth Monroe, no spouse or children. Her heart sank. It wasn't just ink on paper. It was a reminder that no matter how many years had passed, her family still saw her as the daughter who disappointed them, the heiress who traded gold for love. Outside, Rex, their loyal German shepherd, barked softly at the falling snow, sensing the heaviness in the air. From the corner of the small living room, David's old toolbox glimmered faintly under the lamplight, a quiet symbol of the life they had built together, piece by piece. Liz brushed her fingers along the edge of the invitation, her mind echoing her father's words from long ago. One day, you'll understand. Love can't feed dignity. But love, she thought, had fed her. It had kept her warm through the coldest winters, had given her 2 children who laughed like sunshine, and a husband who looked at her as though she were still the richest woman in the world. She rose slowly, walking toward the window. The sky outside was pale and gray, the kind of silence that felt like waiting. Liz exhaled, her breath fogging the glass as she whispered to herself, "If they can't accept my husband and my children, then they've already lost me." Rex settled beside her feet, tail gently thumping against the floor, as if agreeing with her choice. The snow kept falling, soft, endless, and forgiving, like the world itself was listening. 12 years earlier, the night sky over Denver was bruised with rain and thunder. Inside the Grand Monroe estate, gold chandeliers glittered above marble floors, and yet the house felt colder than the storm outside. In her room upstairs, Liz stood before a half-open suitcase, her silk dress replaced by a plain wool coat. Her reflection in the mirror no longer looked like the daughter of a billionaire, just a young woman trembling between fear and freedom. Downstairs, David waited near the servants' entrance, his work shirt still damp from the rain. His dark eyes were steady, though his hands fidgeted with the handle of an old toolbox, the only thing he owned. He looked up as Liz appeared in the hallway, her hair damp, her breath shaky. For a moment, neither spoke. They had already said everything that mattered in the silence of stolen glances and shared dreams. Then the footsteps came. Her father's. "Elizabeth." His voice was sharp, cutting through the thunder. "If you step through that door, don't ever come back." Liz froze, her heart pounding. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing could prepare her for the sound of his voice, a mixture of fury and heartbreak. Her mother stood behind him, tears glistening, unable to speak. For a heartbeat, Liz wanted to turn back, to fall into her mother's arms, to forget love and obey. But then she saw David's face in the doorway, wet scared, but waiting for her choice. She whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." And with that, Liz took his hand. Together, they stepped out into the rain, leaving behind the shining mansion, the inheritance, the safety, and the name Monroe. The storm swallowed them whole, but within it, Liz felt something fierce and pure. Freedom. That night, they didn't know where the road would lead, only that love was worth the cost. And as lightning split the sky, Liz held David's hand tighter, whispering through the downpour, "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The first Christmas in their small rented house was quiet, wrapped in the scent of cinnamon and the sound of laughter. The city lights of Denver glowed in the distance, but Liz and David found their joy in the simple things. The warmth of a shared blanket, the soft hum of the heater, and the steady rhythm of love that filled the space between them. David worked double shifts that year, fixing broken wires in old apartments to pay for Liz's college classes. He'd come home smelling of rain and metal, but always with a tired smile. Liz, studying early childhood education, would wait for him by the window, a cup of tea in hand, her heart full of quiet gratitude. "One day," she often whispered, "we'll have a home of our own." 5 years passed. That dream came true in a modest way. A tiny cottage with blue shutters and a fenced yard. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. Liz graduated, started teaching at a neighborhood preschool, and David opened a small repair business that barely covered the bills. Yet somehow, they always had enough. Their greatest treasures came not in gold, but in laughter. First came Anna, with curls the color of wheat and eyes like her mother's. Then Ethan, 3 years later, a boy who loved snow more than anything else. On winter afternoons, the children would tumble across the yard, their German shepherd Rex bounding beside them. From the kitchen window, Liz would watch, her hands still on the dish towel, her smile deep and gentle. Every Christmas, a box would arrive at their doorstep, always unmarked. Inside, a fruitcake wrapped in silk paper, hand-knit sweaters, and a small silver snowflake ornament. Liz never needed to ask who sent them. She would hold the box close, her heart tightening. "They still care," she would murmur, her eyes glistening with both gratitude and ache. On nights when the snow fell quietly, Liz would step out onto the porch, wrapping her scarf tighter, and gaze toward the mountains where her childhood home stood. Distant, golden, untouchable. "I miss you," she whispered into the wind, her words dissolving like breath in the cold air. "I miss you both so much." The invitation had arrived days ago, but Liz hadn't spoken about it since. It sat quietly on the kitchen counter, unopened now, its gold seal catching the light whenever she walked past. A silent reminder of everything she thought she'd made peace with. The following Sunday, while the children built snowmen outside with Rex bounding through the drifts, David found her standing by the window again. She wasn't crying, but her stillness carried a kind of sadness that spoke louder than tears. He came up behind her, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're thinking about it again," he said softly. Liz gave a faint smile. "It's strange. After all these years, I thought I stopped caring. But when I saw the invitation, I realized part of me still hoped things had changed." David didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, this woman who had once walked away from luxury to build a home out of love. "Maybe they'll see it one day," he said. "Maybe not." She turned to face him, eyes glistening. "They invited me, but not you, not the kids. What kind of welcome is that?" He reached for her hand. "It's okay, Liz. Go if you want. I'll stay here with the kids." She shook her head. "No. If they can't open their doors to my family, then I won't walk through them alone." Her voice was calm, but there was a firmness in it, the kind of strength born from years of choosing love over pride. That evening, she sat at the table with a piece of stationery and began writing. Her pen moved slowly, gracefully, like someone setting down the final words of an old story. "Dear Emily," she wrote, "I wish you every happiness on your wedding day. I won't be attending, but I'll be thinking of you. Remember, real love doesn't ask us to leave anyone behind." She signed it simply, "With love, Aunt Liz." When she sealed the envelope, David kissed the top of her head. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. For Liz, it felt like closure, not bitter, but peaceful. The wind whispered outside as the night deepened, carrying the hush of another coming snowstorm. Liz sat on the couch, her hands around a cup of chamomile tea gone cold. The small lamp beside her cast a soft glow across the living room, the kind of light that makes a home feel both warm and lonely at once. David was fixing a broken drawer in the kitchen, humming faintly, while Anna and Ethan were upstairs, already asleep beneath thick quilts. Rex, faithful as ever, lay by Liz's feet, his head resting on her slipper. The house was peaceful until the phone rang. The sound made her flinch. She reached for it, her heart already knowing who it might be. "Liz," came her brother's voice, calm, composed, carrying that Monroe tone of reason that had always sounded like control. "It's Richard." For a moment, she said nothing. She hadn't spoken to him in years. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he continued. "We're not trying to hurt you. We just want to avoid any awkward attention. You know how the press can twist things." Liz closed her eyes. His words were polite, even gentle, but beneath them lay the same cold divide, the invisible wall between wealth and worth. "Awkward attention," she repeated softly. "Richie, what's really awkward is pretending to celebrate love while being ashamed of mine." There was silence on the line, the kind that carries more weight than words. For a moment, she imagined him standing in their parents' study, the mahogany desk, the family portraits staring down in quiet judgment. "Liz," he began again, but his voice cracked just slightly. "You know Mom and Dad still care." "I know," she said gently, "but love isn't love if it hides behind closed doors." She ended the call before he could answer. For a long moment, the house was silent, except for the steady hum of the heater and the faint rattle of the window panes against the wind. Outside, the snow began to fall heavier, thick, soft, endless. Liz set down her cup and stood, walking to the stairs. She peeked into the children's room, watching them sleep peacefully. Then she turned toward David, who was now standing quietly in the doorway, eyes full of understanding. She leaned into his arms. Her tears fell silently onto his shoulder as Rex lifted his head, pressing close to her knee, the quiet guardian of their small, brave family. The Monroe estate glowed like a palace that night. Strings of crystal lights draped across the marble terrace, champagne sparkled in every glass, and music drifted through the air, elegant, practiced, distant. Guests laughed under chandeliers, unaware that outside, winter was sharpening its claws. Snow had begun to fall hours earlier, soft and graceful at first, but by evening it turned into a white storm, fierce and blinding. The world beyond the gates disappeared under a veil of wind and frost. Inside, the wedding carried on. though whispers spread among the guests. The roads were closing, cars were being diverted. The highway might be unsafe. Still, the Monroe family tried to keep smiling. For the cameras, for appearances, for pride. Then, just as the orchestra swelled for the bride's entrance, a young maid rushed in, her cheeks flushed from cold. She hesitated before speaking, glancing nervously at the patriarch seated at the front table. "Sir, they just announced on the news. A tree fell on Route 71. A car was hit." The chatter dimmed. Crystal glasses froze midair. The maid swallowed hard. It was a blue sedan, registered to Mrs. Elizabeth Carter. The name struck like thunder. The father, Robert Monroe, stood up so suddenly his chair fell backward. For years he had refused to speak her name aloud, as though silence could erase his regret. But now, that silence shattered. "What?" His voice trembled. "Liz? My daughter?" His wife's hand gripped his arm, her face pale. "Robert, the storm, I don't care," he barked, reaching for his coat. "She's out there. I have to find her." The guests watched, stunned, as the man once known for his unshakable composure stumbled toward the door, heart pounding louder than the storm outside. For the first time in 12 years, his pride bowed to something greater, fear. As he stepped into the night, snow lashed against his face, but he didn't slow down. Somewhere beyond the swirling white, his daughter was waiting, the same girl he had told never to return. And now, all he wanted was to bring her home. The storm had swallowed the highway whole. Snow swirled like white smoke, blurring the line between sky and earth. Robert Monroe's headlights cut through the darkness just enough to reveal the shadow of a car ahead, a small blue sedan, half buried in snow. He stopped abruptly, heart pounding. "Liz," he whispered. The door creaked as he stepped out into the blizzard, wind clawing at his coat. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he pushed forward, calling her name again and again, until his voice vanished in the storm. Then, faintly, a bark. Rex. Following the sound, he found the car by the roadside, its windows frosted over. Inside, through the glass, he saw Liz, her head resting against the seat, David's arm around her shoulders, both children curled against them like small, sleeping birds. Rex lay outside the door, his body blocking the wind, his fur dusted white. Robert dropped to his knees beside the car. Relief flooded him, stealing his breath. They were alive, shaken, but safe. Moments later, his wife's car pulled up behind him. She ran to him, tears freezing on her cheeks. Together, they opened the car door. Liz stirred, blinking as the cold air rushed in. For a long second, father and daughter only stared at each other. Two lives separated by pride, reunited by fear. Robert's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry for letting you go that night." Liz smiled weakly through tears. "I was never cold, Dad. I had love." He helped her out, holding her as though afraid she might vanish again. The family gathered there, shivering, crying, laughing all at once. The snow kept falling, but somehow it no longer felt cruel. Back at the Monroe mansion, the lights still blazed for a wedding that had already been forgotten. When the door opened again, it wasn't the bride or groom who walked in. It was Liz, her husband, her children, and the dog that had guarded them through the storm. Gasps filled the hall. Forks clinked against plates. The music faltered. And then, from somewhere near the front, a voice, cold, familiar, whispered, "Who invited them?" The room fell silent. The silence after those words was heavier than the storm outside. Every guest turned, whispering behind gloved hands as Liz stood frozen near the doorway, her breath visible in the chill that followed her in. David's arm brushed gently against hers, a quiet reassurance. Anna clung to her mother's coat, while little Ethan hid behind Rex, the dog's steady presence grounding them all. At the far end of the hall, Robert Monroe still stood, his coat unbuttoned, snow melting across his shoulders. The voice that had pierced the silence, cold, disdainful, belonged to his older sister, Eleanor, the matriarch who had orchestrated the wedding. "This is a private family event," she hissed, her pearls trembling with her indignation. Robert turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Exactly," he said quietly. "And they are my family." The room gasped. Cameras clicked. Somewhere, the orchestra faltered to a stop. For the first time in decades, Robert's tone carried no authority, only truth. He walked toward Liz, each step echoing across the marble floor. The distance between them, 12 years of silence, judgment, and pain, seemed to shrink with every stride. When he reached her, he didn't speak. He simply placed a trembling hand on her cheek, the way he used to when she was a child. Liz's tears fell freely, but they weren't tears of shame anymore. "I was wrong," he said, voice breaking. "I thought love was about keeping the family name spotless. But it's about keeping hearts together. And I let ours fall apart." Behind him, Eleanor's face tightened, but the room had already changed. The guests, the same people who had whispered about Liz's mistake, now watched in silence, some brushing tears from their eyes. Liz looked at her father, then at David and the children. "It's never too late to start again," she whispered. He nodded, his voice soft. "Then come home." Outside, the snow had begun to ease. The wind softened, and the world seemed to exhale. As the family stepped together toward the grand staircase, the lights flickered, not from power loss, but from reflection. The crystal chandeliers shimmered against the frost-covered windows, scattering gold across the floor like forgiveness finding its way back home. Rex trotted behind them, tail swaying as if guiding the way. And for the first time in years, the Monroe house felt like a home again. When the snow finally began to melt, it didn't happen all at once. It started with a drop, then another, tiny rivers of light tracing their way down the window pane. Inside the Monroe house, laughter echoed where silence once lived. The scent of bread and pine replaced the chill of old pride. Liz stood by the window, watching her children chase Rex through the soft sunlight, her father's voice drifting from the piano behind her. Life, she thought, doesn't return overnight. It thaws slowly, like snow giving way to spring. And in that thaw, hearts find their way home again. True love doesn't need an invitation. It always finds its way back home. And sometimes, a parent's pride is just a coat hiding love's longing.